8 months down, yeah, the industry's been bruised, but we're not here to fold, we're here to refuse. While others pause, we built the plays, now we're leading the charge in a brand new phase. You feel that tension, that's the pressure to grow. Hiring's messy, turnovers high and budgets low, but we don't panic, we adapt. We sharpen the edge and reload the map. This is the staffing playbook, strategy on tap. Steven brings the grit, G Money brings the slap. Forget the fluff, forget the spin. We give you plays that actually win. From the break room floor to the boardroom seat, we've walked the walk, now we bring the heat. CDLs, forklifts, line leads, and execs. We place the best and fix the wrecks. Insight, hustle, leadership bold. No safe takes, just the truth told cold. Wanna scale your team, wanna close that gap. We got the data, the story, and the roadmap. So turn it up, lock it in. This is more than a podcast, it's a win. This is the staffing playbook. Let's get to work, it starts right now.
Welcome back to the Staffing Playbook podcast for another high-impact episode on sales. I'm your host, Steve Farrell, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Genevieve Bourgeois. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I am very well, very well. Also, I think we're in 31 months. We need to update our video.
Yeah, well, that video definitely needs to be updated, probably make it shorter, but it does get me amped up for the conversation.
Yeah, I was, drawn in. I loved it. That was great.
Thank you. Well, we have another high impact episode for you today. We are joined no other by Shannon Kahn. Shannon, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank
Good to
you.
be with you both.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I met Shannon for the first. I've seen Shannon on social media, and I've read some of her blogs and seen some of the posts. But first time we met was earlier this year at Dan Morey's Sales Summit in Orlando, and I remember sitting in on your session, and I think I filled up like a whole notebook just from your session. It was just phenomenal. And so I, begged Shannon to come on our podcast, and she graciously accepted. But I want to do a brief introduction about Shannon here. And Shannon, correct me where I maybe missed some of the details, but Shannon is the founder and CEO of SMK Consulting USA. She's bringing more than 30 years of staffing industry leadership to the table. She's held VP and CSO level roles for multi-billion-dollar firms. She's built national sales organizations from the ground up. So this is the person you want to be talking to. She now serves as a fractional chief sales officer, helping agencies turn good pipelines into sustainable revenue engines. So no better to join us on our topic, how you sell is your differentiator. Shannon, what did I miss?
Well, I'm going to just age myself here and say it's probably closer to 40 years now. It's been a great ride, and I've enjoyed it very much. I'm one of those people that got into it by mistake and still here. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, Shannon. We were talking earlier this week or last week. Sorry, it's Monday. What's today? I don't know. Anyways, we were talking last week, and you were telling me about your past experience and your career, and I just, almost 40 years in staffing, like you have been through all of it, the ups and downs, the recessions, just really the good, the bad, and the ugly of staffing. And so to have someone with your experience and knowledge to come on here for 45 minutes to just give us the playbook, I think our audience is in for a treat.
And here, I've got to add just one more thing. Steven doesn't do handwritten notes like we do, Shannon.
Oh.
So if he took down a whole book, that says a lot about you.
That's great. But in that future conversation, we'll have to talk about what's in those notes and what resonated with you.
I've got to read
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually have it right over here.
That'd be great.
So, Shannon, topic that's just top of mind for everyone in our industry, regardless of what vertical you serve, is how do we get more business, existing wallet share with our current customers, and then of course bringing on new business, the lifeblood, bringing on new business to our firms. And staffing spend is down, and the industry's been down for over 31 months. For some it's been longer, for some it's been shorter. And a lot of sales reps are they're burning out left and right. I see it every single day. It's just really difficult out there to stand out and to get new business, and people are looking for answers. And I think we're going to have some answers for our audience today. We've done a lot of different series at different episodes on how to gain more market share. And with you've made it really, what I really like is you've made it really consumable and actionable. It's one thing to share big ideas, but if we don't get down into the tactics and the specifics, people just get lost and they get discouraged and sometimes give up. And so you are light, our light at the
end of the tunnel.
End of the tunnel.
Okay,
like beacon on the hill. Thanks for my words.
Our lifeline. I don't know, like what the lifesaver vest.
You're a beacon of hope today for those sales reps struggling, and those sales reps and leaders that are looking to have that competitive edge. So, are you ready to get into it?
I am, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because I really want to speak to not just the individual contributor salesperson, but also the leaders who are looking for ways to help their teams and their individual salespeople find a way to stand out and to differentiate.
So we're going to dig into the overlooked art of preparation, reading the room, tactical coaching, and the shift from transactional vendor to a strategic partner. So let's jump in. I want to start off with, you coined the phrase for this episode, how you sell is your differentiator. So what does that look like in practice for a staffing salesperson, a staffing leader, walking into a prospect's office tomorrow?
Yeah. Well, thanks for leading with that question. And because I think a lot of people might be thinking we're looking for what makes our company different than everybody else's. And there's this tendency to talk about our quality is better, our service is better, you get me, those kinds of things, which are very difficult sometimes to really boil down to a differentiator. And so I'm going to talk first about how did I come to this place of saying how you sell is different. And a lot of it came from things that I read and research from different, very credible organizations. So for example, we've heard for years now how buyers are changing how they go through the buyer process. That buyer journey has changed. And buyers are now able to do a lot more research on the front end, and when they come to the place that they're about 2/3 of the way, maybe 3/4 of the way through the buying process before they actually talk to a salesperson. So that opportunity to get in up front is harder and harder. And Gartner had a stat that something like 75% of buyers want to make a purchase with a non-sales led transaction. Now, a lot of this is geared towards tech, but at the same time, that's a little bit alarming, right? However, that the likelihood of their being satisfied with that purchase and not having regret actually goes down when there's no salesperson involved. So that alone tells you the salesperson can make a difference in the buying decision. That is one that the buyer actually doesn't have buyer's remorse for, but it makes a better choice. The second thing that from Korn Ferry, which is another very respected organization, they research every year their customers. And one of the things that they came back with is they asked customers, what's important to you in your interactions with a salesperson? And it came down to know me and know my business. And then when they asked what was the thing that was most irritating when you're working with and dealing with a salesperson, it's when someone doesn't know me and doesn't know my business. So that's pretty strong evidence that says, one, know me and know my business, which comes to the preparation and the research. And two, if I'm going to work with you, you better bring something to the table that's going to make this whole buying process easier for me and bring more clarity to whatever decision I make. Then you can add some value and then stay with me and make sure that this purchase I make is a good one. So you now want to take, those things are often a lot of the clients that we're talking about there may come from tech, but it does apply to staffing, because buyers now today can do a lot of research, or they can ask their peers, go to a conference, read something online. They'll go to your website, they'll read what you have there, and so they're going to come into that sales conversation with a lot of information already. So if you're coming in without doing your research, you're at a big disadvantage from the start. So that's a big piece of it. And making what I see often with salespeople in the staffing industry is they aren't taking the time to do that research. Let's just say it's a given you're focused on customers that meet the ideal customer profile for your organization,
right?
So that you're focused on the right type of customers, but then taking that next step to say, who is it I'm selling to? Are they the right people? What's important to them? The industry they're in, what's going on externally and both internally to their organization, but externally in whether it's economic, legislative, or otherwise in their industry, so that you can walk in with some demonstrate that you have some knowledge of what's going on in their industry, their organization, the pains that they may be experiencing.
Okay, just to go and kind of follow up and just do a little quick play-by-play recap on that. Sorry, Stephen, I know you want to dive into the next thing.
Oh, I do. Well, no, I want to dive into this one too. So go for it.
Essentially, like, if you're doing sales, okay, make sure you're doing your prep work, your research. Make sure that you are providing clarity. I think that the word clarity just really, I even highlighted it. Okay. I think that is one of the most important words there. Provide clarity, bring clarity and value. And then we also got to keep in mind salespeople, like not even just salespeople, excuse me, clients, they are doing prep work as well. Learning who you are as an organization. Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've asked this question in different ways to a lot of different guests, and they've all have said the same thing in a different way of what our customers want. They want us to know them, to know their business. We want to be able to come in there and challenge them, not just agree with them. And this is where the real grind happens, and this is where a lot of barriers happen with a lot of salespeople. That they've been asked by their sales leader, you have to have X amount of cold calls a week, right? Maybe it's 150 cold calls, and then you need 15 to 20 new prospects every single week out of those calls, and then discovery meetings. So your whole sales funnel, and I think a lot of salespeople struggle with, how do I find time to really get to know I've got a prospect list of 100 people. I got to get 15 new ones every week. Like, how do I make time to get to know these prospects and their business? Like, I want to come in and ask for their business, tell them we can do it. We're the best of everything. I'm paraphrasing, but they find it hard to make the time to do what you just suggested. So maybe as a follow-up, Shannon, how do you speak? What do you say to those sales reps or those sales leaders leading those sales teams and saying you got to get X amount and you don't have time to do your research, your homework on them?
I think there's another question coming in. You want me to answer that one first?
Oh, well, here, my thing is I put my finger up. I'm like, oh, okay, wait a minute. And so my question is really, do KPIs matter when it comes to getting results?
I think you have to look at what you're selling and who you're selling to. Because there are some organizations that are effective at doing high volume, and they've got a machine that works for them. I think it depends. And if you're moving up the chain to a higher level buyer and a more complex sale, that becomes less effective. So I think But so I think the KPIs, you need them, yes. But as leaders, if you're so focused on KPIs that you're not having conversations about those prospects that are in the funnel, in a deal stage, and asking more pointed questions and detailed questions about those deals, and you're just looking at the numbers each week, then I think that's where the KPIs should be given the right level of priority. And it's if you have a rep who's struggling, yes, you want to go to that and say, but let's look first at your activity, what you're doing, because it's a roadmap. It's a roadmap to success. But for your top prospects, you as leaders, we need to give our salespeople permission to also to spend time and block time for that research, for that more in-depth, personalized approach. You can't do that with 500 or 1,000 leads. You can do that with a smaller subset. And so I think that what happens sometimes is that the leaders get so caught up in just looking at the activity numbers that they themselves don't always take time to jump in and dive into that research and deep level of what's going on with these more high potential prospects that really are closer to what we would call our ideal prospects.
Okay, so really targeting in on your ideal audience. I think that is, like what you just said, the right level of priority.
Yeah, I think you also now in today's world, you have marketing that can do a high volume of touch, right? At the same time that your salespeople are working on, so that just to build that awareness, so that when your salesperson is going to approach those prospects with something more personalized, there's some knowledge and understanding, awareness who your organization is. So let marketing really handle that volume, and your salespeople, if you have them focused on way too many prospects, they're not going to be able to give it this attention. So I'll give you a really quick example. This comes from one of my favorite books. It's Confessions of an Advertising Man by David Ogilvy. Read it sometime, came over from Scotland in the 50s, opened an advertising agency, never had been in advertising before. Oh, he's one of the largest in the world. But the first week he opened his firm, he wrote down the names of 5 companies that he wanted as clients. And they were things like, Bear Aspirin, Campbell Soup, Exxon, things like that.
Big names.
Big names, probably not even Fortune 50s, probably at the time. And all of them became clients eventually.
Really?
All of them became clients at some during his tenure there. So that stuck with me for years. I read that book years ago, and it has stuck with me because did he only call on those 5? No, he had other prospects, but he had a really strategic approach for those 5 that he learned their business, he learned their competitors, he learned who their customers were, he learned where they congregated and who their decision makers were, how they made decisions. And eventually he was able to get in front of them and have conversations about what's going on in their organization and how you want to solve problems. So I think, it's an interesting story that you could apply to any sales environment that says, if you're working on 5 prospects, you're not going to have enough numbers, but you can have an intense focus and a hyper focus on that many, and be able to do the level of detailed research that you need to create a personalized approach.
Yep.
And understand them. And then as you get one and close that, then you bring others into that. Now, maybe the number's 10, but you understand the point is that at the same time, you've got all of these other things happening above the funnel. Those that are really close to the funnel, at the top of the funnel is where you put that extra effort and research and time and preparation.
Right.
Yeah,
Targeted on audience and intense focus and personalization, but knowing who you want to target, even though, how many times have we said this, Stephen? Unify marketing and sales. Okay, we've said this a million times. But the thing is having that strategic approach, because just because you're going after those like 5 or 10 clients Doesn't mean you're going to get all of them, but there are still those KPIs and metrics. Therefore, keeping your leaders informed with the context and having the bigger goal of knowing them.
Yeah, you said it. You said it just right there, Genevieve. Keep your leaders informed, give them the context. And we're talking about how to set yourself apart from the pack, from everybody else. Everyone else they've got those high volume metrics that they're going after.
I had to do the whole smile and dial thing for,
yeah.
No, that does not work. Not for me. Why do you think I went back to marketing?
Yeah, I think that if you want to groom some of your people to become very competent enterprise level, strategic level salespeople, if they don't develop that skill, they're not going to advance, and eventually they'll burn out and leave. So it's a very important skill set to develop, to really build someone's skills as a professional salesperson. And too often we don't give them enough coaching and time to be able to move in that direction and build those skills.
No, we really don't. And you just said it best at the very beginning of your answer to this question. And it's our customers are saying, know me, know my business. We brought on HR leaders on this podcast, and that's exactly what they said. It's like, know me, know my business, and then you'll get my time.
Or have a referral.
Or have a referral. Yep, warm referral. So let's move on to, the prep work of giving you that competitive edge to set yourself apart. So, let's talk about some of those high level meetings before a high stakes call. How should a sales rep prepare? How can a sales leader help their team prepare? Can you walk us through, maybe a checklist or the mindset that you've refined over the years that our listeners could steal and use right away?
Yeah, so I think break it up into three things. Again, the research, which we've talked about, and being able to do that to a really deep level of research. The second is having a very structured approach to meeting planning. And that I have different formats I've used over the years and worked with clients on that helps your salespeople really break down who are we talking to in this organization, what is their profile, what's their level of influence, what might be important to them from a personal and a business driver, and looking at, again, the organization, what's going on in the organization that might be happening, changing, in who are their customers. Really important to know your customer's customer. Because at the end of the day, we want to help them look good to their customers so that they can grow. And so taking that next step and kind of deeper dive there is really important. So that structured approach to really how you set up for a meeting and how you set up for success. What is the best possible outcome I could get in this particular meeting? What would be the minimum acceptable outcome that would come out of this meeting? And then I think another key part is, given what I know, there's a lot of things I don't know, but how can I craft exploratory questions, discovery questions that are really get the customer talking and sharing information with me so that that gets their attention and they want to share more and they want to talk more about what's going on in their organization. So they start to reveal things that you're not going to be able to find through your traditional research method. So I think those are things. And then the practice. Anytime there's a very high stakes meeting with a client, it is really important to set up multiple practice sessions, bringing in other individuals into that meeting so that, again, you're not going it alone and everybody understands their role, the transitions that take place, whether it's a formal presentation or an initial discovery meeting. Meetings with clients are hard to get. And you really can't afford to waste that time. So that practice about, okay, these are the people that are going to be there. Here's the questions going to ask. What are we looking to get out of this? If we hear this answer, how do we pivot? If we hear that, a different answer, how do we pivot? And so you've done that work ahead of time, and that allows you to be more focused on what's going on in the room and to be able to change. Too often I think the salespeople feel like they have to follow a particular order of asking questions, where if you get new information, you need to be ready to shift and change the course of your conversation based on what you hear. And that's a really difficult listening skill to teach. And it takes time, and it takes years, sometimes, in development of individuals and confidence to get to that point.
When I first started off in sales, I just want to be like, I have all the solutions. But no, it's true. My brain's like, okay, like I know myself. However, it is one of those things I actually had to like retrain my brain essentially to learn to listen and be able to pivot and ask those important questions in order to be like, okay, all right, because sales, in my mind, 70% of it is listening.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, it truly is. And you could come in prepared, you could have practiced, and all of a sudden in the meeting, you hear just somebody mention, well, that acquisition we just made, like, okay. I hadn't planned to ask about that, but I just heard something. So if I don't, then I'm missing an opportunity to learn more and demonstrate that I did listen and that I am listening to what you're saying and want to know how that's going to impact your organization and how do we help you make that a successful integration.
Yeah, Shannon, you bring up a lot of good points here. I think a lot of us are still living in the past where it was the one call close, right? You get a discovery meeting. It wasn't that hard to get them back then, 2019, and you came prepared and had some great dialogue, and the client's like, okay, send me your rates. You send over a proposal, go back and forth. They sign that they're ready to move forward. But those one call closes are rare. And if when they do happen, it's most of the time, it's a red flag, for a variety of reasons. But, a lot of people in our industry are starting to pivot into multiple discovery meetings. Initial intake meeting, first discovery meeting with maybe HR, then you're having it with the director of HR and maybe the CFO, or maybe you're having it with a VP or CEO. But you have to be patient and understand that there's going to be a lot more meetings you need to have to make sure there is enough information shared and enough trust built through the process that they feel confident in making a change. And that rarely happens after just one discovery meeting.
That's a really good point, Stephen. And the sales cycle in most industries, but in staffing as well, has really been extended. And a lot of that has to do with the number of people that are involved in the decision making. And the more people involved, and you're selling to committees, it's really difficult because you're trying to satisfy more than a number of people, and it's really difficult to do that. So that's why you've got to be somewhat patient with that buying process and understanding the customer's buying process, because every company has a different way of going through that process. Some, it's a very structured approach through purchasing. For others, it's no, we want to have buy-in from a lot of different people. And they may have been burned in the past. So you've got to be ready to go through those steps with them. So it is an elongated sales process for sure.
It is. And there's this fear that if it takes too long, someone else, another competitor, is moving through that sales cycle faster than you. So how do you kind of navigate that in the back of your head, where if I go too slow, I'm going to lose them. If I go too fast, I'm going to lose them. Where's the Goldilocks here?
Yeah, I think you need to gain that trust up front with your customer or prospect so that they are willing to share that with you. And early in that process, I go back to something I'd said earlier, but when you're when you're having these sales, you're going through the sales process, part of what you want to do is tell the customer how you're going to stay involved, even past the sale, to make sure that they're satisfied. At the same side, help me understand how your organization and how the decision making happens in your organization, who else is involved in these kinds of decisions, and what are some of the things that impact moving forward, so that you have a good understanding of what those roadblocks might be, or those stumbling blocks that you might be. And if you're clear on that, and you're more likely to get information that helps you understand where those stumbling blocks might be, that also sets you apart from your competitors, because you're not just trying to slam it into a 1 or 2 call close. You're trying to understand how they buy and work with them to get them through the process so they can make a good decision. And what we sometimes forget too is for that buyer, when they make a decision to go with your organization versus another, it's a reflection on them. How that plays out and how your organization supports their business needs and business goals and challenges and issues that they're trying to address, because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. They're trying to solve a business need, is going to reflect on them. So they want to make a good choice.
That's
and
right.
Sometimes that means taking a little longer and sharing, being able to really evaluate in a more thorough, thoughtful way than what we were accustomed to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah. Back to, you made a comment earlier about, bringing in the right people to the meeting as you're preparing, you're role playing, role practicing. And, sometimes there's personality conflicts where there might be another sales rep or maybe your sales leader or maybe someone from your operations team that just might connect with the prospect in a different way, in a better way. Maybe you're a little like me, a little rigid, a little to the point. And I see your face there, John.
You're a robot at times. Okay, listen, I will call him out on that, but go on.
Thank you. So as a robot, my prospect might not appreciate a robot meeting with them, and so you got to be able to raise your hand and say, I'm going to bow out for the greater good because I'm just the wrong personality fit for this prospect or this team I'm meeting with.
That's true.
Why you brought me in.
Yes, and if you know that there are individuals on the team that are more analytical in nature and that's not your strong point, then make sure you have people on the team that can relate to them. And some of that can happen by looking at the buyer personas and the positions and what they typically are concerned about, and a little bit of doing research on the individual. And there's tools that can help you look at their profile on LinkedIn and tell you a little bit about their personality traits. So there's a lot of tools that can help you with that preparing, but you got to be really ready to and astute about looking at and watching for buying signals and watching for the absence of buying signals before you move forward. And if you haven't got those buying signals, then you push forward, you may just alienate.
Yep. So that leads into our next topic here. I want to talk about reading the room. So we've prepared for the meeting. We've done our research. We understand what the customer wants, what they do, what their vendors do. You understand the industry trends going on in their business, and you've got the right people going into the meeting. You understand who's going to be in the meeting and their personas. And so as we get into that meeting, great sales reps seem to have this ability to fill the energy in a meeting and adjust on the fly. And so I think any great sales person, they've just learned that skill over time. They've learned to read body language. It's not hocus pocus. These are real things that are leaning into why you're feeling that way based on body language and tonality. So, what cues do you watch or listen for? How do you coach, these sales leaders to teach their teams to sharpen that skill without becoming overly scripted?
Yeah, good question. I think there's one. I'm just going to use kind of a quick analogy because some of this is about foundational learning before you can be comfortable listening. Is if you're learning math, you're going to learn your, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You really can't go to algebra until you've got those memorized, right? Otherwise, you're spending too much time thinking about the basic parts before you go to algebra and trigonometry and then calculus. And when you think about the ability of a salesperson to really be fully present and listen and be attentive to things that are body language, things that are indicating that they're either leaning forward and listening and interested in learning more, then I think you've got to make sure that and we don't want to ever sound scripted, but until you learn the script, you really have a difficult time doing the pivoting that you need to do, listening closely enough so that you can observe those small little things that are happening in the room. And I think that's what I would say first is build the foundational skills first. And because listening is as you would say, Genevieve, one of the most important skill. But until you've got those other foundational skills, your mind is playing tricks on you and telling you all kinds of things so that your listening is impaired. So I would say that as a starting point. And I think looking for those, not just what customers say, but what they don't say. And I think sometimes salespeople walk out, if they didn't hear anything negative, they thought it was a great meeting. When you are confronted with questions or objections, those are buying signals. So I think if you, in the absence of those, you want to dig a little bit more and ask more provocative questions that are going to get them to share more information. And ideally, you want to walk away with information that you didn't have when you walked in the door, because then they're starting to share things that are more, I think, sort of if not confidential, at least things that only an insider would know. You want to look for the think questions that they're coming from them, or suggestion of bringing other people into the sales process from their side. So that also indicates that they are taking this seriously and they want other people's opinions on it. So I would look for that. I mean, the typical shaking of the head, taking notes, those kinds of things are really things that you want to be observing. But in a sales meeting, your mind can be racing so fast that without someone in there with you to help and do a kind of a playback of what they saw, there's a likelihood of missing things, especially if there's more than one person in the meeting. So as leaders, don't strand your people in a very important meeting by themselves. Make sure that you are there or someone else is there to help make sure that you're getting every bit of information you can out of that customer. So I think reading the room is really an important skill, and one that it's not an entry-level skill. It's a skill that you learn when you have, again, built a foundation of sales techniques, questioning, preparation, practice, and your own company's value proposition and unique service offerings, so that again you can talk about them without having to think or reference maybe something that's written that you can speak to it on the cuff.
Yeah,
I just
remember.
pointed to my wrist because of Steven's little tool.
This
Because
one
that's actually helping him out, because you can go and record. Steven, you can go and talk to it more so, but essentially, like, foundational learning. Okay. I used to bartend. I had to learn how to read body language, see on their faces or anything else. And it's like, I am so sorry that your steak was overcooked. Like, but you got to know how to approach them if people seem more friendly or more cordial. But I really, really love the fact that you brought up body language. You do not want to sound scripted. Because if you're thinking about it too much, and if you don't know it, naturally, you're going to sound automated. Steven,
and you miss, I know, guilty. You miss cues too. I remember I was with the sales rep on a sales call, and
with those buying signals.
I remember the gentleman we were talking to got a little reserved when I asked him a question about their current process with their staffing agencies that have a relationship, and with them, how strong that relationship is. Are they a partner in their employment strategy? And there was just kind of this quiet hesitation. The eyes went down and there was a pause. And so the sales rep was like, did that question like upset you? Like, should we miss something? Like, he picked up on the cue. And the prospect was like, well, I haven't really thought about it this way, but I don't really have strong relationships with my agency partners, and they're not aligned in our employment strategy and our onboarding, and that's a problem. It's the first time I've really thought about it this way. And so
that's an excellent example of watching and jumping in and not continuing forward until you have uncovered what that hesitation is all about. And I think I mentioned to you when we were talking the other day, early on in my career, I had an example that walked into a very big client with my boss and had a presentation ready to go. And from the moment I walked in, I was really new in my career, and I could tell something was wrong, and I kept going. And when I walked out, I had broken out in sweat. Like I was just head to toe. I knew we were not on good footing, and I didn't. My more mature self would have stopped and said, "I feel like something's not right here. Can we talk about it?" And
Yes.
I think it's really, really important to one again. Until you've got that foundational strength, you're not going to be able to feel confident enough to bring that up and to say, hey, I feel like something's not right here, or maybe I said something that made you kind of give pause. Can we talk about it?
Yeah.
I like that vulnerability.
Yeah, it's just they're not going to move forward if there's something that underlying that, and in this case, it was something that had gone on internally, not something we had done, but somebody internally had done, and it really changed their whole thought process on moving forward. And so yeah, it would have maybe changed the outcome had we stopped, said we're not going to go forward on this right now.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's hard to do sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very competitive landscape, and it's a race on markups. People are just going for the lowest price to buy business, hoping to make it up in the future. And, sales leaders I've seen are still teaching just the markup, the bill rate to sell that, right? Oh, you want a 25% markup? We got you covered. And that's really not sustainable for holding your margins and, being profitable and having that predictable revenue. What are some of the first moves, a sales rep should make to reposition themselves and their company as a strategic partner instead of, like the rest of the world, being treated as a transactional vendor?
Yeah, I think that when questions come up about what's your rate early on, or what's your fill rate, or all of those are those typical questions you get from a client. I think I view those as just a form of objection. And there's really an underlying question or information that's missing for them. And so they go to things like fill rate and bill rate to make a determination about going forward. So fill rate, for example, I don't think there's any correlation between high fill rates and a satisfied customer, because
Right.
fill rates are so easily manipulated. So, and when you get that question, you can ask, how is that related to solving your business issue over here, and kind of redirect, and what is the impact on turnover and productivity for you when people don't stay? So you can kind of redirect them, because really the underlying in both cases is, I don't know you, I don't trust you, you haven't shown me that there's something different here. So the things that I can make a decision on would be rates and perhaps some other quantifiable KPI that I can take back to my teams and say, hey, they promised us a 95% fill rate, or they promised us this rate. Unless you're tying it back to, and that goes back to the original point of the conversation and how you differentiate, is pulling out those questions that are going to lead you to understand their business, what their business issues are, what their goals are, and how your organization, and it almost always comes back to something to do with people, right? How your organization can help solve those. And then those things become less important in most cases. And at the end of the day, if it truly is, I want a 25% markup, or we can't talk, then those aren't your ideal customers in most cases.
In most cases, yeah. I've told my team if they've having a discovery meeting and the prospect in the first 3 to 5 minutes asks that one question, what's your markup? Then you didn't do a great job starting off that meeting. You let them control the conversations. You weren't, doing some initial background questions with them. You just weren't connecting with them. And so now it just became transactional in their mind. Within 3 minutes, they're like, okay, what's your bill rate? What's your markup? It's like, hold on, I don't know where I went wrong in this conversation, but let's restart. Let's reboot this, because we're not even there. I don't even know if I can help you or if you want me to work with you. we haven't even talked about, your challenges, your goals, what's working, what's not. It's like
Yeah.
bill rate is not appropriate at this point in the conversation.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I can help you yet. I think I'd like to go back to understanding a little bit more. Here's what I've learned from my research about your business, your industry, what's going on. Are these things that are happening in your organization? Are these the kinds of things you're facing today? And probably if you get a yes, great. How is your organization then addressing those, or what are some of the top issues that you are facing today that are your biggest challenges? And just kind of acknowledge and divert back to that, because you're right, unless you can get to that conversation first, then rate is just one way of getting you, and sometimes it's just a way of either getting you to say yes to a low number or getting you to leave. and then it's a delay tactic.
No, I've told my team, if you ever want to walk away from a deal, like you're in the middle of a discovery meeting, you're like, yes, this is not the right fit for us, I need to politely excuse myself. All you have to do is just tell them your rate, and guaranteed you're not going to get that customer. Like if you lead with rate, you're going to lose on rate.
Well, I think it goes back to being what we're talking about here is, if you end up at that question, then I think you have not done the work to differentiate the way you sell and how you approach the conversation. Because if you start with that, then the rate doesn't come up for a long time, right? It's really about business needs, business issues, what's going on in your organization and your industry and your competitors and your clients. And then we'll get to talking about how people can solve that need and how we can solve that need.
That's right.
For you.
Yep.
I'm taking so many notes. This is all gold.
You're going to have a good recap at the end.
Oh, I'm trying to prepare for it. I'm not even sure if I'm going to get everything.
Awesome.
Like legit.
We're going to depend on Steve.
I'm on. We're going to have to, because I'm at 4 pages.
All right. A couple more questions, because we are coming up on time.
Sure. Yeah.
When we talked a little bit about how a lot of sales leaders are managing by metrics instead of at an individual level with each account. And you got to get your 150 sales calls in. So what metrics or behaviors that you've consulted on that tell you a sales organization is actually moving towards a consultative approach in their selling before any metrics show up on the scorecard?
Yeah, well, I would tell you one of the first things that I, when I start working with an organization, is I look at their CRM, and I look at their pipeline, and I start to peel back the onion, look deeper into the things that led to that deal to come into the playbook, into the CRM, and what's gone on since then, and what actions have taken place. And I would say the vast majority of the time, a lot of stale deals, a lot of deals that aren't real deals, and there's not a lot of really strong conversations happening. So I think for leaders, I would say, don't just look at the numbers, how many deals you have in the pipeline, how many new deals, all of those things. Take time with each of your salespeople to dig deep on a few deals, and then you're going to start to uncover whether these are valid, realistic deals that fit your definition in your organization of what makes it a deal. And if you don't have those definitions, I would start there, because if you sell your salespeople and you need X number of deals in the pipeline at this, they're going to put them in there. Doesn't mean they're real. So I often treat conversations with a salesperson in the same way that I would prepare for a conversation with a client. I'm going to ask open-ended questions. I'm going to dig in for more information. I'm going to challenge. And it's really going to be very obvious very quickly who's having real conversations with customers and who is just filling the bucket with what the numbers that you're looking for. So I think that's for me, a real evidence of whether or not an organization is a healthy pipeline or not. And are things then progressing? But if you're going to measure one thing, measure the number of really qualified meetings with decision makers that happen on a week-to-week basis. And are those deals progressing? Can they define who those buyers are, what conversations they've had, what the next step is, who else is involved. If there's only one contact associated with that deal, probably not enough, right? There's more than likely going to be other people who can influence the deal. So I think that for leaders, just like we want to give salespeople time to be more intentional about their research and preparation, sales leaders need to also spend the time to really dig deep into what's going on with their pipelines and feel confident that what's there is valid and real.
Yeah, it's often you manage what you measure, and if you're measuring the wrong metrics, I think it's Newton's third law: for every action there's an equal or opposite reaction. That's right. And so if you're measuring just cold calls or just discovery meetings, I'll give you a real life example. When I first took over the sales team a year and a half ago, we were incentivizing contracts signed. So for every contract signed, you got a $250 bonus, which was great for a brand new sales team to just get comfortable in selling, getting contracts. But what ended up happening is only 30% of those contracts actually placed an order with us, and our sales team was getting more in commission for contracts signed versus commission on revenue and GP billed. And so we were incentivizing the wrong metric. We were just, it's not like they were purposely just getting contracts to get them, but hey, when you get that paycheck and it's double what you normally get because you signed a bunch of contracts, your behaviors change and you start leaning into, I got to get more contracts signed versus, is this a good account that we can service and service effectively? And so you have to measure the right metrics to move the right behavior.
Yeah, I use that law of physics often in talking about compensation. So be careful what you change, because there will be a change in behavior, and that's okay as long as you're prepared for that and understand that you're not just switching one behavior for another and still not getting the results you want.
By the way, Genevieve and our listeners, I got Newton's third law analogy to sales from Shannon at her workshop at Dan Morey's Sales Summit.
Is it in your notebook?
It's in my notebook.
He never takes handwritten notes, so the fact that he pulled that up, I'm actually quite impressed.
Yeah, I've used that phrase. I've used that news laws many times because it's so true, and I've seen it in real life where where companies will change a comp plan, and often it's related to, I want more, new accounts in. Well, but they aren't necessarily the right accounts, and so you just got to be cautious about understanding how those changes can be. The salespeople will find the quickest path towards making money, and not necessarily going to be tied to your strategic goals.
And so here's the thing, I've told Stephen this so many times because I studied marketing and I had to actually go through a sales and marketing class, and I actually worked in sales in the IT sector. Okay, so doing recruiting and sales in the IT. Yeah. All right. It sounds like you already know how difficult that is. Now, my professor, she literally gave us all coasters. It's actually in the other room, and it says no deal is better than a bad deal.
Yeah.
Because we want to be doing business with the right people and having the right partnerships and building the right amount of trust within one another.
Yes. And if you reward salespeople for coming to the Monday morning meeting, and I've got X number of deals and I've got, this many meetings, but they're not the right kind of deals, or they've been there for, you need to set up some guidelines and rules of engagement with your CRM. Is what constitutes a deal, what constitutes moving from this stage to this stage to this stage. And if it's been in a stage for too long, then you need to kind of maybe put it over in the parking lot and on hold until it's ready to move forward. But those kinds of disciplines, CRMs are a great tool, but you have to be on board as leaders onto how you're going to use it and what the rules of engagement are, the guidelines.
Right. Yeah. All right. I know we're coming up here. I got one more question, just a quick hit takeaway for those that are listening in. Tomorrow morning, a listener has, because we talked a lot about this professional development. A lot of it through, we've got to research, we've got to be better listeners, we've got to look for body language, we got to be prepared for the meeting, we got to know when to pivot. So if a listener today, tomorrow they wake up, they have 30 minutes to block for professional development, what's a single exercise or an activity you would have them do to level up their how you sell, differentiate immediately?
I think what I would recommend to individuals and to sales leaders of teams is to go through an exercise of taking one of your prospects that is, again, fits your ideal customer profile. And if you don't have that defined, define that first. And then go through that really deep exercise of mapping out, and if you don't have a format, build one that's a structured format for doing this. Who are the players? What's their industry? Where do they fit in the industry? Where do they, what's their strength in their particular industry compared to their competitors? What's going on externally, internally that might impact decisions they're making, things you could bring into the conversation as you're sending them emails, leaving them voicemails, talking to them, meeting with them, to demonstrate that you've done your homework. So I think I would say go through that and build a planned approach to that particular prospect for outreach and personalized messaging with the goal of getting an opportunity to have a conversation with them. Something you can replicate with others.
And so I hope you don't mind, not to distract everyone. I was looking for a book that we actually all went through, the one-page marketing plan. And so I'm like, because I want to be like, oh, we have this, I've done it. And I rearranged my office recently. So I'm like,
I got you covered.
Okay, thank you. So that's actually something that we've been doing because you do want to figure out your ICP. And that's where I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm so eager, I'm trying to find it because I thought it was within arm's reach, and it's not.
I'm familiar with it. Jim Young and Mark Winter put that together. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. And so I think that's just a great strategic approach because I work in marketing, but I have done the sales part as well. And so that's something where
it's something everyone can do.
You call me?
Yeah, it's something everyone can go back to their office and do is take that one prospect and really give that, take half a day and just dive in and figure out, okay, now that I've learned and I think you approach it too without any kind of preconceived idea of what you're going to find. I think that's also really important, is to eyes wide open. I don't know what I'm going to learn, but I might learn something really interesting that gives me something to hold on to and grasp and use as sort of that point of reference when I'm having those conversations about, I saw that article that described things that are going on in your industry, that things are in higher education, you're up against a lot of challenges today. One example there, they've got, typically they're in one state and they've got employees all over the country, and that's a challenge for them. So from a risk standpoint and a cost standpoint, but they also want access to the right people. Understanding those dynamics then in your conversations with them puts you in a very different place with their outreach versus your standard, hey, we can provide you people, or we can, solve your recruiting needs. Maybe that's not what they need. They need something else. So I think, just that one pager, it doesn't need to be a book, but that one pager of just go into it without this thinking what you're going to find, and just see what comes to the surface as being kind of an that critical piece that you can then use as your launching point.
Yeah.
Incredibly valuable.
All right. Well, we are way over time here. Shannon, you've been awesome. Genevieve, give us a 10-second roll up.
Okay. I only have 10 seconds. Okay. So be intentional. Learn and do. Okay. Prep. Do your research. Okay. That's going to give you the competitive edge. Have your checklist. All right. Make sure that you are providing clarity and value. Structured meetings, okay? Also, remember, clients also will do research and prep work on you. So don't forget that. But also, you got to know what is important to them because they're going to be thinking about the with them, aka what's
Yes.
in it for me, know why. Also, crafting exploratory questions and be able to go and pivot, okay? And then gaining the trust of people because people do business with other people. Also, make sure you are able to listen to open-ended questions and also challenges, all right? Because we're in the business of people. Now, when we go over to the whole leader aspect, okay, context is key. Communicate with your leader. It's not only about KPIs, but also have your targeted audience. Like, who are your 5 to 10 clients that you are actually going after? Create a roadmap. Be strategic. All right. Be intense with your focus and personalize it. All right. And then let's see if you end up with in a few minutes markups and fill rate questions, you messed up. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to put it that way. All right. Because you failed to go and separate yourself from the rest of the herd. And then,
Yeah, and I think at that you can at that point pivot and say, "Oh my gosh, I really did, let me kind of rephrase why I'm here. It isn't to really talk about specifically markups and fill rates. It's learn about your business. So could I ask you a few questions?" So I think you can still recover from that, but they too often I think salespeople fall into the trap, but they feel like they have to give an answer to that question.
Right.
And that's where they need to be able to have open-ended questions and accept challenges.
Great 1 minute and 8 second recap.
Sorry. That Shannon, you gave us so much. I literally like I'm gonna get carpal tunnel.
No, it's great.
No, fabulous. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you both. This was really
Shannon, absolute treat. If you're an agency owner or executive and you're looking for some consulting on your sales process, please reach out to Shannon. Almost 40 years of industry experience. And if you didn't take a whole bunch of takeaways today, then you're probably doing okay. But for the rest of you, hopefully this playbook, you can bring it home and put it into action. And if you need some consulting on that, reach out to Shannon. I've got her website on the screen here, smkconsultingusa.com. You can find her on LinkedIn, Shannon Kahn, or Kahn, right? How do you say your last name?
Kahn.
Shannon Kahn. Shannon, did we miss anything? Anything else you want to share with the audience?
This has been great. I don't want to take any more time right now. I just say LinkedIn's the best way to reach me. Just send me a message. I'm connected all the time, so that's the best way to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. Thank you, Shannon, and we'll see everybody next week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.